All right, we're live. So hello, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Tosca Lee, and I am one of the Rogue Women writers. We are a group of 10 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officer to journalism, to crime scene analysts, to special investigators, hostage negotiators, to psychotherapists, to international consultants, a former pageant queen, to White House strategists. So quick little orientation here. There's a chat room on the side of the screen if you are on Zoom. And if you click the icon, participants and special guests, you are all welcome and encouraged to say hello and introduce yourself. And if you have a question, especially to leave a question in that chat bar there. And for those of you who are joining us on Facebook Live, please be sure to say hello and leave a comment if you have anything that you would like to tell the authors, especially if you have a question that you would like to ask. So please don't be shy about asking those questions because we are going to do our best to try to accommodate them all. All right, so we are in for a super treat tonight, as the authors tonight will be reading from their newest work. Remember when people used to do that? So I'm really, really excited about that. They're going to be sharing a few of their favorite treats. Oh, this is Timber too, by the way. I asked for a purse dog, and so he's 160 pounds. So that's my little sidekick there. So our authors are going to be sharing their favorite treats, maybe even a few behind the scene secrets. And I just want to remind you that all the books discussed here tonight should be available through your local bookstore. So please be sure to grab or order a copy, support your local booksellers, and also be sure to check out our guests' previous work as well. We also have a book giveaway that is happening tonight. So we'll have the details for you. But as I said, my name is Tosca Lee. A little bit about me. I'm the author of 11 novels. I am coming at you live tonight from the farm with Itchy Dog, from the farm in Nebraska, where I live in the country. And my most recent two books are The Line Between and A Single Light. So it is my absolute pleasure to be joining you tonight. And at the end, like I said, don't forget those questions. All right. Are we ready for our introductions and to introduce our authors? Sure. Okay, I'm going to start with Rhys.
Hi.
Rhys. And it's Rhys Bowen?
Bowen.
Rhys Bowen. I'm so sorry. Rhys Bowen is the New York Times bestselling author of the Molly Murphy and Royal Spyness historical mystery series, as well as several internationally bestselling standalone novels, including the Venice Sketchbook. Rhys's work has been translated into over 30 languages and has won 20 awards to date. A transplanted Brit, she now divides her time between California and Arizona. So everybody, please say hello to Rhys.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Maybe he should vacate the premises. So Rhys, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. It's it's still lovely to talk to people. We're not quite back to going and speaking. We did one event for the new book in person, which was very strange, but normally it's been great talking like this.
Yes, it's been great. And it has been a little bit strange getting back to doing things in person, especially for me. I'm a hugger, so I miss the hugs and sometimes. So on that. Well, I'm going to quickly introduce now Valerie. Where's Valerie?
That's right.
Okay. I'm going to move. Valerie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Valerie writes mysteries, novels, and children's books and is a former executive editor of Essence magazine. She served as artist in residence at Columbia College in Chicago and is a former adjunct professor at Ramapo College in Mahwah, New Jersey. Mahwah.
Whatever. New Jersey.
as well as a former artist in residence at the Tyson School of the Arts in East Orange, New Jersey. She graduated from Howard University and holds a master's degree from the Bank Street College of Education and the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. And so you might know Valerie from her paranormal romances under the pen name Savannah Wells and children's books, including the Wilhelmina Rules series. The Freedom Gifts, A Juneteenth Story, and the Afro Bets Book of Black Heroes, co-written with Wade Hudson. She is married to a noted screenwriter and playwright, Richard Wesley, and has 2 adult daughters. So Valerie, thank you for joining us.
And I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much again for the invitation. And it's just good to see everyone. Glad to see Kellye, as always.
Absolutely.
New people.
Yes, absolutely. And hello, by the way, to everybody who's joining us and jumping on the Zoom still. We're so glad you're here tonight. All right. Well, very quickly then, I will move on and introduce Kellye. And don't worry, we're coming back. We're going to ask some good round robin questions and give everyone a chance to introduce their latest novel. So Kellye Garrett is the author of Like a Sister. She also wrote the Detective by Day Lightweight Mysteries, which have won the Anthony, Agatha, Lefty, and Ippy Independent Publisher Book Awards, and she has been featured on the Today Show as a best summer read. She serves on Sisters in Crime's National Board and is a co-founder of Crime Writers of Color. So Kellye, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I have to thank you guys, especially Tracy Clark, for inviting me. And it's funny because I adore Valerie Wilson Wesley. She's like a legend. And so I'm just so honored to be on the panel with her. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Legend. Thank you very much. Sometimes.
It's the truth.
Absolutely. And we've got some good questions about that too, Valerie, that we can't wait to ask you. So, okay. And John, I just lost John's. Oh, John, I'm so sorry. I just lost. Hold on. Give me 1 second here. It's my first time emceeing. Can you tell?
No. Doing fine.
All right, here we go. Give me 1 second. And I've got a non-itchy dog, so I'm very happy about that. Okay, 1 moment. All right, John Lescroart's best-selling books are printed in 16 languages and published in more than 75 countries. And he has his own record label, which is called Crow Art Records. The first project was a CD of his original compositions, which was piano solos performed by a master pianist. Though dismissed as a stellar lawyer, John did not actually go to law school, but has a degree from Cal Berkeley in English literature. Oh, and his name is pronounced Lescroart. So in case you were wondering, it's not Lescroart or any other iteration.
The opposite of Morqua.
Morqua. So right. Lescroart. All right. So very quickly, welcome, John. Thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know if you made a mistake by inviting me, because I seem to be the only male here on this panel.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all.
Believe me.
Nothing wrong with that at all. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to Rhys, and I'd like to just briefly introduce your book and have you tell us a little bit about the book and give us a little background, maybe a secret or two about it. And then I will have some questions to follow up later on. So let me just say very quickly that Rhys's Wild Irish Rose is her 18th Molly Murphy mystery. And she is now co-writing that beginning with Wild Irish Rose with her daughter, Claire. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
This is Wild Irish Rose. It came out last week, so it's brand new, and it's my first venture with my daughter Claire. Now, I'm one of those crazy people who writes an awful lot of things. So I put Molly on hold for about 4 years because I couldn't handle 3 books a year. I was doing my Royal Spinous series, which, is the lighter one about the minor royal in the 1930s. And I was doing a big standalone, often about World War II, every year. So Molly had been put on hold for a while, but my daughter came to me and she said, I think I would like to write the Molly Murphy series with you. Now you can imagine, I was a little ambivalent about this. She's my daughter, I love her. I thought, what if we try it and it's a disastrous failure? And I have to say, no, you have no idea. I knew she was a good writer, but this is first person books. This is picking up someone else's voice. So we started and she's been amazing. She read all 17 books before she started this, but she got the voice instantly. She came up with the plot that we wanted to do. She just sort of literally took it and ran with it. She'd say, well, I can see how the party scene will go, so I'm going to do that. So we finished the second one now, and I'm gradually going to step back, I think. And in a couple of books' time, I can say, okay, this is your series, goodbye.
Wow.
And she can take it over. So, it is and such fun to work with someone else too, because writing is a very lonely profession, as you know, and to have someone call and say, I just had a great idea for the so-and-so scene, why don't we do this? And I go, oh yes. And then so we literally spark each other, and I think it's made the series, 18 books is a lot of books.
That's a lot of books.
It's made the series sort of fresh and new again, and it's given me that sort of desire to look at new plots and to say, oh yeah, let's do this. So I'm really grateful for it, and I'm hoping for great things for it.
Now, here's a question: had she read the first 17 books before this point?
Most of them, yeah. I think she probably read most of. I inflict. If you're one of my children, you have to read my book. That's part of the contract. Oh, one thing that was very funny: we were doing a live event last week, and someone raised her hand, and she said, so how did the two of you meet up? And I said, I made her.
I made her.
I said, I knew that later in life I'd want to not write as many books, so I thought I'd better have a child at this stage. So
That's wonderful. And then, Rhys, could you give us a little bit of background for anyone who's not familiar with the Molly Murphy books? Could you tell us just a little bit?
Yes. Well, Molly Murphy, the first book in the series, Molly Murphy is an Irish peasant woman in the just around the turn of the 20th century, and she accidentally kills the man who's trying to rape her. And he's the landowner's son, and she knows she'll get no justice, so she flees for her life. She gets as far as she can, and then she's given the chance to come to America using another woman's name. And she does this. She gets as far as Ellis Island, and while she's on Ellis Island, a murder occurs, and the name she is using shows up as the prime suspect. So that was the driving force behind Murphy's Law, which was the first book in this series. And that came out and immediately won 4 awards, including the Agatha Best Novel that year. And so since then, the novels are really very much of the immigrant experience. New York in the early years of the 20th century, how hard was it to come as an immigrant if you didn't have a good background support system? And so we've seen Molly gradually struggle her way through the very difficult first years until now at book 18, she is settled, she is married, she has a 2-year-old son. And so she can look back and in a way forget how hard it was to start with until this book. Because in this book, this was Claire's brilliant idea. She said, we need to remind people what they liked about Molly Murphy. And so in this book, she goes to Ellis Island with a group of women, it's the Vassar Benevolent Society that her friends belong to. She goes to New York to deliver warm clothing to immigrants who are arriving in New York in the middle of winter. And while they were there, they see a woman who looks very like Molly. And later that evening, she finds that someone on Ellis Island has been murdered and they've arrested this woman. So it's her own life story coming back to hit her. So that was what got us going on this story.
Wow. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to ask you to read from that in just a few minutes. I'm going to skip to Valerie for a moment now. Valerie, your book is A Fatal Glow, and this is your second Odessa Jones story. And it is a story, this is a cozy, correct? And this is the story of a widow named Odessa Jones. And would you tell us a little bit about this new series?
Sure. This is Odessa Jones is a struggling widow who works as a realtor at a dicey real estate firm and makes ends meet with occasional catering. And what makes Odessa unique is her second sight. She can sense, smell, and hear things that other people can't. She can also see glimmers, which are kind of like auras that allow her to peek into a person's spirit. And I think you could say this cozy is kind of a paranormal culinary cozy because she also does a lot of cooking in it. And whenever she smells nutmeg, she knows that somebody is going to die.
Mm.
And needless to say, she's lost her taste for cocoa and brandy Alexander's. And when she lands in this particular book is about this story, is she lands an exclusive catering job with Casey Osborne, the richest man in town. And she's excited. She knows her luck is changing until, of course, he drops dead at her feet at the event. And at first, her aunt's homemade preserves are suspect. And then, of course, suspicion calls on her and her co-workers, the co-workers who helped her to cook. To clear her name and find the truth, she has to delve into Osborne's life and discovers that the two of them have ties in the past, and that everyone from his sinister business partner to his tormented ex-wife had reasons to kill him and the opportunity to do so. So with the help of her spirited aunt, Phoenix, who's one of my favorite characters, and her little cat, Juniper, another favorite character, and her co-workers, she searches for answers. But then a second murder occurs, and it leads them all down a very frightening path that is kind of filled with hidden agendas and all kinds of folks that are evil. And she meets someone who changes her life forever. And that is kind of in a very general way what this first book, the second book is about, second of the series.
And you mentioned the nutmeg, and I believe you have nutmeg on the very first page from the get-go of the story. Isn't that correct?
Right. I have to establish this is a particular kind of thing that is a problem.
Now, we do have a question. Susan wants to know if you do include recipes.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. In my first book, A Glimmer of Death, I was a 7-Up cake, which is a great cake, easy to make. And this one, it's a collard green quiche, which is healthy and fun. And of course, tested by me about 4 or 5 times before I put it in the book. But with every book, there's also going to be a particular thing that kind of runs through the book that is important, but not essential to the solving of the crime. But it kind of, for me, I like to cook for one thing. And it adds a kind of a fun thing to do. And also for readers who have sent in pictures of things they've made, which is very impressive and always kind of touches my heart.
That's really fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
Very fun. All right, well, I have some more questions for you, but very quickly, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kellye Garrett's new story, Like a Sister. So, Kellye, this is the story of a disgraced reality TV star who is found on a playground in the Bronx the morning after her 25th birthday party. So tell us the story of Like a Sister.
Sure. So it came out also last week, like Rhys's book. And it actually came from, that's me very big. It came from a New York Daily News headline, and it was Lyric McHenry, pregnant former reality star, found dead in Bronx at 26 with cocaine and no pants on, which most people are like, that's no way that's an actual headline. And it is. If you are from New York, you know, the Daily News, that's what they do. And of course, me being a crime fiction writer saw it and was like, ooh, that's a book. And so I was just totally fascinated with this idea. As you mentioned, I had written 2 books in a series before. So I kind of was like, how can I write this book? Who's the main character? Should I do another amateur detective novel, make it lighter? Should I do more serious? Should I do a PI? And I was walking down the street one day and it hit me. Oh, she was going to see her estranged sister and she never made it. So Like a Sister is told from the POV of Lena Scott. She's this Black woman who is a grad student at Columbia. She's kind of estranged from her family. She doesn't talk to her sister. They haven't spoken in 2 years because her sister does have a drug problem. She doesn't really talk to her dad, who's like this hip hop mogul who she believes when he left her mom when she was little, he also left her, but she knows that obviously her sister was coming to see her at 5 a.m. and she didn't make it. And she doesn't believe it was just an overdose. And so that guilt kind of propels the story and it makes her kind of confront things she doesn't want to confront, which is her family and her history.
Okay. And am I correct that you also utilize humor in this story as well? So
I'm kind of sarcastic. I'm sarcastic, so I can't help. I remember I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a serious book. It's gonna be so serious. And one of my really good friends was reading early pages and she texted me that she was laughing on the train. And I was like, no. But then I'm like, I'm just super sarcastic. I think humor helps every book. So I definitely, even though it's a more serious book than my series, it definitely has a lot of humor in it. It's not like a dark book in terms of there's no torture or rape or anything like that, but it is a more serious book and it's domestic suspense with a Black girl as the lead character.
Thank you so much. And I have some more questions for you as well, but I'm going to skip down the line to John. John.
Yes.
The Missing Piece.
Missing Piece
is your 19th installment in the Dismas Hardy series. So for those who have not read it yet, or for those who are not who have not read the series, can you introduce us to the series and tell us a little bit more about Dismas Hardy?
Dismas Hardy starts out as a 38-year-old kind of bartender, and it's a book called Dead Irish. And it was interesting. I wrote that book because I had written 2 Sherlock Holmes books before that, and the Sherlock Holmes estate wrote me a nice letter saying they were going to sue me if I wrote another one because my publisher wouldn't put up the $50 license fee.
Over $50.
$50. So I decided, well, I got to do something different. And so I had this 38-year-old guy who was an ex-lawyer, ex-Marine, ex-cop, and also an ex-father because his son had died in a baby crib accident. And we first meet him when he's a bartender at the Little Shamrock Bar. All the books are set in San Francisco, and this is the one that started all that off. We meet him as a bartender, and over the course of 20 books, he goes back to the law. He becomes a best friend of a cop, which is always good if you're writing crime. So anyway, by the time I got to this book, I was trying to think of what I could do that, you always want to have a theme that's important. And this book is all about the Innocence Project in America, which I had no idea how it all worked. And I'm not a lawyer, as you said, but it's really very interesting. I was at a dinner with my son, who is a defense attorney, and my best friend, who's my consultant on all my books, named Al Giannini. The two of them were talking after dinner one night about a guy who had just been exonerated on a technicality. And Al, the prosecutor, said, yeah, as if he didn't really do it. And my son goes, he didn't really do it. They proved it. They wouldn't have let him out of jail. So anyway, I said, oh, this is it. This is my book. So this is how this book begins. Someone's let out of jail. 4 days later, he's dead. And the whole story is about whether or not he was really guilty, and if not, who killed him. And anyway, it was really like we've said, there's a lot of humor in these books, and there has to be when it's that heavy a topic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And your first book in the series released what year, John?
Oh my goodness, I want to say 1988.
So this has been 24
during
years.
the Civil War. Yeah.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to skip back up to Rhys. Rhys, I'd like to invite you to read us a couple of pages, and then I've got a question or two for you, and then we'll just go on down the line like that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is, I just said that Well, on Ellis Island, Molly takes her ward, Bridie, who is now 13, to help her hand out clothes to the immigrants, and looks around, and suddenly Bridie is missing. It's teeming with people, and Molly starts to get worried. Panic rose inside me, and I told myself to be calm. She wasn't a little girl anymore that I couldn't let out of my sight. Just as I was determined to go into the baggage entrance and ask if anyone had seen her, she appeared from the darkness inside, forcing her way past the waiting line of people, and ran towards me, still carrying her large bundle of cloaks. "Oh, Molly," she said, "there you are." Relief spilled out as anger. "What were you doing in there? I was worried sick. I thought you were following me, and then I looked and you weren't anywhere." My panic made my voice sound harsh and a bit shaky. "I was following you," she protested. "At least I thought I was. I saw your red hair disappear into the building, and I went after you into it. I suppose I couldn't see much over the cloaks I was carrying. I followed the woman through the baggage room and then up a big staircase, and there were doctors waiting and checking out everyone. I thought that wasn't right. And then she turned around and it wasn't you. She looked so much like you, though. Bright red hair, pale skin, freckles, and just the same height, too. I tried to run back down the stairs and out of the door, but the man at the door said I couldn't. He said I had to wait my turn and go through registration in the building. And I realized he thought I came on the ferry with the immigrants." She stopped talking as we made our way back around the outside of the building, and the full force of the icy wind met us. At last we came to the outside tables where we'd been working. Sid came up to us. "Well, those went quickly," she said, pointing to the dwindling pile of clothes. "Those poor people with nothing but the clothes they traveled in. Bridie, where did you disappear to? Molly was worried." She turned to me. "I'm glad you found her, Molly, although I don't think any harm could come to her on an island. There's nowhere to go." "I'll have you know I was almost kidnapped," Bridie said dramatically. "Kidnapped?" Sid shot me an alarmed look. "She got into the registry room by mistake, following a woman she thought was me," I explained. "And they thought she was one of the new immigrants and wouldn't let her out again. I took Bridie's bundle from her. But how did you finally manage to make them let you out?" I realized that the very nightmare I had worried about for myself had almost come true for Bridie. "I told them I wasn't a newly arrived immigrant, but the goddaughter of the head of the Vassar Women's Benevolent Society," Bridie said.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I have another question. What is it like writing with your daughter? So we know that I heard that you can't tell who wrote what anymore. And so I'm just curious, are there ever those moments where, you know, how mother-daughters can be, where you have moments where you're, you know, get on one another's nerves, or is it not like that at all?
Well, I had one of the interviews last week. She said, "I have 2 sons, and if we tried to write anything, we'd end up killing each other." And she said, "Have you ever wanted to strangle each other?" So we actually did a fun shot with both of us going, "Ugh." But I have to say, Claire, she's a very easygoing sort of person. And I don't think we've ever had a big fight in her whole life. When she graduated from high school, she and I went around Europe for 3 weeks together, and we'd be on trains and things. And we didn't have one cross word all that time. We laughed an awful lot. That's what we do. We laugh an awful lot, which is very therapeutic and very nice. And we didn't really know how this would work until we tried it. And what we do is we talked through the plot together and sort of got an idea of where we were going. And then we sort of took bits that we liked. Claire would say, "Well, that scene in the theater, you know, New York theaters better than me, so why don't you do that?" And then she'd say, "Well, and I'm going to do the scene where they try on the clothes." So, you know, and then we go back and read each other's scenes and give input to each other's scenes. And so we move smoothly ahead that way. It's worked very well so far. And the thing is that you come up with, you know, when I read, I love to come up with a plot twist I haven't expected, when you suddenly go, "Oh, I didn't expect that." And that's what you get when the 2 of us writing, that Claire will throw someone into a scene I had no idea was coming. And I think, wow, that's really good. So I think it's kept us both on our toes. And it's also made it much more fun to talk to someone when you're writing, to say, "Well, I'm doing the scene about so-and-so now. Well, you know, what do you think she would have done?" And then we talk it through. And of course, Claire is she has 3 different degrees or 4 different. Anyway, she's the consummate researcher. So she's reading the New York Times for every day that we're dealing with. I have to stop her from saying, yeah, I know it rained that day, but Molly's not going to take an umbrella. We have to say it's fiction. So we're trying to sort of, but she's come up, she reads the New York Times, and if you're writing history and you're writing a real place like New York, you have to include that real history. So in the second book, there was a fire on a ferry, and Claire said, this is great. And so that we've incorporated that into the story. So we're getting these neat little things that were real tidbits in the New York Times. And I think that makes it much more real and much more relevant to do that. So, it's fun, and we do enjoy it a lot.
And has it brought you closer, do you think?
I think it's given us a reason to talk to each other all the time. Normally you check in with your children once a week or so, and that's very nice. But we've been talking almost every day. And luckily, I spend my winters in Arizona. As you can tell from what I'm wearing, it's not furs. And she lives 10 minutes down the road. So we do see each other most days in the winter. And then she comes out in the summer, and she and I go and have a little writing retreat somewhere and thresh out the plot of the next book when we're together. And then we work through, we go through, we edit, and it's all very smooth so far. And the thing is, with someone else, with someone new, she's coming up with new ideas and with new things she'd like to tackle. She just said today, we had breakfast together, she said, you haven't done the orphan trains yet. And I said, well, I never found a way to put them in. She said, we have to put them in. So, we're getting all these entrants. The thing is, she doesn't know New York. When I was starting the series, I would go to New York and I would walk pretty much every street I wanted Molly to walk. And I would say, what can you see? Do you get the wind straight off the Hudson as you turn this corner? Can you hear the tugs on the East River if you're here? And luckily, Molly lives in Greenwich Village, and a lot of the things that happen in the Lower East Side. So many of those streets are exactly as they were. So I can actually go and be in Molly's New York. And I've had letters from people who say, you said Molly walked from blah to blah. That's completely impossible. And I write back and I say, I did it. In those days, they thought nothing of walking 4 or 5 miles. They were just used to it. So she doesn't know the details of New York. And she will sometimes write a scene in which, Molly ran out of the door and headed for, and then she'll just go blum, blum, blum. And I fill it in because I do know. So I've got to take her to New York and take her around on my famous walking tour and say, okay, this is the Jefferson Market building, and this is the so-and-so, and this is the Washington Square Arch, so she knows where she is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that would be a fabulous walking tour. And in the meantime, now, Rhys, what do I have here? This is your favorite drink.
Yeah. Well, I decided for my snacks, I was celebrating the Venice sketchbook, my last book, because it had just been nominated for the Edgar. So my snacks came from that. And if you're in Venice, what else do you drink but Prosecco?
Of course.
That is my absolutely go-to tipple. So wherever I am, if you're traveling too, it's so light and easy on the stomach. You find when you're doing a book tour, you get back to the hotel at 9:30 at night, and you do room service, Prosecco, and that's the way you survive. So definitely my Prosecco. And you've got some Tramezzini. Yes, the Tramezzini.
I don't know if these are the real kind, but it's what we came up with.
It's very nice of you to do this too. They're normally little open face sandwiches. They're about that size. And they would have, in Venice, you have bars where you just go and order like this one, that one, and they're really cheap. You can have like 6 or 8 of them. They have, tuna and olives on them, or hard-boiled egg on them, or prosciutto on them, and you just mix and match and have a lovely little mixture of them. They're usually on very thin white bread, and they are the go-to thing in the middle of the day in Venice. Absolutely.
I think I could eat about 15 of these. So
that's the problem.
These were made by my husband and 21-year-old who helped me put together this little smorgasbord tonight. So, all right. Well, thank you, Rhys. And now, Valerie, what do I have here that you love, that I read that you love? Uh-oh, is she muted? She might be on mute. Valerie, are
Right.
you? Oh, there
Any
you
kind
go.
of I love any kind of red wine. That I don't know if you have the Merlot or Pinot Noir. What
This is, I
Cabernet,
sent my 21-year-old on an errand, so this is whatever he.
whatever. If it's red, it's fine with me. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And then, as you mentioned, you have a wonderful collard green quiche recipe, and it is up on the Rogue Read site. So if you go there, it's there in its entirety. And if you, like me, love quiche, then you should definitely make this quiche. And I was editing all night up till 6 a.m, so I didn't get a chance to make it, but I have a token mini quiche right here that is nothing like the recipe that Valerie provided.
No.
And it's very sad because it has no crust, but this is my token quiche.
Okay,
And reminder to tell you to please be sure and try this quiche if you are a quiche lover.
Yeah.
So Valerie, I'm going to take a sip of this red wine in your honor, and I'm going to ask you if you would, Chris's screen.
Here's the quiche.
And Valerie, I'm going to ask, there's the quiche recipe right there. So it's Dessa's Handy Dandy Collard Greens quiche. Do you want to tell us anything else about this recipe, Valerie?
Well, just make sure that if you use the green, the collard greens are squeezed very dry, or it's going to be very watery. I think I put that somewhere in the piece. Here it is. Be sure to squeeze them dry, or your quiche will be watery, and that's absolutely true. So, and that
my mouth is watering. I love quiche.
It's good. It's a good quiche, and it's healthy, and and it's fun.
Valerie, there's nutmeg in it. What are you doing?
I didn't even notice that part.
What did it say? I missed that. Oh.
Well, we'll have to see how much nutmeg is in it and see.
I didn't put it in.
You didn't put it in. Okay. All right, we're safe.
Maybe there is nutmeg in it, but something I didn't catch, I'm sure, if it's in there. But it's
Wonderful. Valerie, would you read to us from A Fatal Glow?
Sure. I'll read the first page or so and a half.
Perfect.
Chapter 1. Speaking of nutmeg, the chapter starts off with nutmeg. There was no whiff of nutmeg. The usual warning that death is heading my way. No signs from the gift, that unreliable second sight that graces, and I use the word loosely, the women in my mother's family. No disturbing colors or sounds. I only heard my late husband's voice, quoting oddly enough those well-known lines from Macbeth. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Daryl's voice usually comes at the end of a dream, when I'm going through a rough spot or missing him more than usual. So why this morning? I glanced up from my laptop as two men in suits that cost more than my monthly mortgage strolled past my cubicle into Tanya Risco's office. The younger was wickedly handsome. The older just looked wicked. His skin had a yellowish cast to it, a problem for a dark brown skinned man. And although he was built like an aging prize fighter, the ring had definitely won the last round. Risco Realty, where I work, is a cut-rate real estate firm. Tanya, the owner and my boss, inherited the business from a vicious man brutally murdered in the room where the two gentlemen were headed. Wonder what that's about, muttered Benton Laverne, who worked in the cubicle next to mine. Our workspaces were narrow and separated by low plastic boundaries, making it easy to keep your eye on what folks are doing and poke your nose where it wasn't meant to go, something at which Benton, a thin, dapper man, solemn as an owl, was adept. He also had a tart, endearing sense of humor that could turn bitter on a dime. When I first joined Risco Realty, he finally disappeared. He was happier now. Everything about him had changed, including the glimmer. Glimmers are something only I can see when certain people enter my space. A gift from the gift, you might say. They can be as hazy as a shadow or as bright as a colorful aura, They often give a hint of what to expect from a stranger or a clue into who that person really is. Yet they can change for better or worse depending upon what life has served up. My Aunt Phoenix, an expert on glimmers, charms, spells, and all things weird and extrasensory, said that we who see glimmers give them our own interpretation, so that it's not only what you get from a person, but who you think that person truly is, which complicates everything. Yet, seeing glimmers, coupled with the ability to sense, hear, and smell things other folks can't, is what makes me unique, along with a silver streak of hair that occasionally appears on the left side of my head. First page and a half.
I love it. Thank you so much. And
Thank
now
you.
I've got a couple questions for you. So your series in the 90s, it's the Tamara Hale series, is that correct?
First one, yeah, but it was the 9 books, yeah.
The
first one, yeah.
The first one. So that series hit right at the start of a great wave of crime writers of color, along with Eleanor Taylor Bland and Barbara Neely and Paula Woods. And so nobody was exaggerating when they said that you are a trailblazer and you have helped to open the door for a lot
Very
of
kind.
crime writers of color, and hence your fans here. So I just want to know, who were the writers that you admired when you were growing
I
up?
read everyone. I admire. Well, I must tell you, my newest, who I really admire these days is my dear Kellye Garrett. I read her books. They're so young and so smart and hip. And she's a really, I admire her as a new writer. Well, newer than me anyway. There were so many, certainly Barbara Neely, but I admired her work. Walter Mosley. I also Ruth Rendell, with P.D. James. I read I like Louise Penny. It's a whole broad group of writers, and I read a lot. I'm reading now again the most extraordinary book. It's not a mystery. It's Isabel Wilkerson's book Caste, which is just an extraordinary book and just as enlightening and amazing. And so I kind of read everything that I can, but that I think is what I'm reading now. But it's again. As a former journalist, I read lots of newspapers, lots of magazines, and that's where I get a lot of the ideas that I have. But they're not really in this kind of book. It's a different kind of book. But just generally, you always, no matter what you're writing, you bring aspects of what you've learned into a piece, and that's much of it. And
now you're into a new cozy series, and this is your first cozy series.
Second cozy.
Second
cozy. Right.
Second cozy. Is this the first cozy series though that you've done?
First cozy series.
First cozy series.
First cozy series.
But this is something new for you.
It's very new. I had written, as you mentioned before, paranormal romances, which was fun, but and children's books, which were really just a lot of fun to write. But this was kind of a new, and I think at this point in my life, so many people find cozies very comforting, I must say. And particularly these last couple of years, I've kind of gotten into this particular subgenre with a great deal of interest and frankly relief, because there's no violence in them, and it's so much violence in the world these days. And like so many readers, I've found them something that you can escape. I can escape into when I write them, and that's been fun. But I do miss I miss my Tamara Hale, and I at some point will have another one. But you do what you can do when you can do it.
Is there any Tamara Hale at all that occasionally creeps into Odessa Jones?
Well, I've got to be careful about that, frankly, because you don't want. I'm sure readers who have read the whole series say, "Oh, she's done that before," but they're such different characters and live in such different worlds, and their lifestyles are so different that there's not a lot of chance. I mean, Grovesville, which is where Odessa Jones lives, is nothing like Newark, which is where Tamara grew up. It's a rough, tough city, and of course, it's not a suburban city, and that's a very different world. So the folks she comes into contact with are different. Tamara's a former cop, and Odessa is a caterer, and has this particular gift for seeing inside of people. So I think although they're both in first person, which but finding the voice of each one has been different. And so in terms of, but they are mysteries. So you're always aware of needing to make sure that they make sense, as a mystery must make sense,
Mhm. Mhm.
no matter
Thank
what
you.
you're writing.
Thank you so much. Well, we will circle back with more questions, but for now, I'm going to move on to Kellye. So Kellye, let me find my special snack that I've got here. Oh, Kellye, you have to explain what this is. And I don't know if it's made correctly. My assistants have concocted it, but I will sample it. This is the greatest job in the world, emceeing this. So here, what do we have?
That's a lemon drop. And it's funny, I'm not actually a big drinker. And so the character of the sister who passed away, Desiree, is like lemon drops. And so I chose that drink because I was just asking my friend who I sprint with. I was like, what's your favorite drink? And she's like, lemon drops. I was like, okay. And I just put it in there. And then
Okay.
everyone asked, they're like, we need a recipe for lemon drops. I asked my friend. So that's her recipe. So I'm sure it's delicious though.
And this one it's not as, it's a little more sour, a little less sweet with
Okay.
homemade simple syrup.
Oh, nice.
So yes, absolutely.
it.
So this is on the Rogue Reads page, and you can find the recipe for this as well. So Kellye, will you read to us?
Sure. I forgot we were supposed to do this. So you
I'm
guys,
so sorry. I know
it's
you've had a hectic week.
totally
with
my fault. I was in Tucson for the book festival this past weekend, so I'm a little scattered still, but I'm going to read the first 2 pages. I found out my sister was back in New York from Instagram. I found out she died from the New York Daily News. Her post was just as attention-seeking as their headline. Hers came at midnight. Look back at it. Hashtag birthday, hashtag 25, hashtag grown folks business, hashtag home, hashtag NYC. All over behind the back shot of her, nothing more than a black slip dress and no bra. The article came less than 12 hours later. Former reality star Desiree Pierce found dead in lingerie in Bronx with cocaine and no shoes. I'd come straight here to where they found her as soon as I'd seen it. Why? I don't know. Maybe to confirm it was real. Maybe to hope it was not. Maybe to get one last glimpse of her, even though I knew her body was long gone. Whatever the reason, I'd arrived at this particular playground in the Bronx on autopilot, the place my sister had come just hours before. It looked how I felt, all reds and blues and worn down. It would never be accused of being the happiest place on earth. Former reality star Desiree Pierce found dead in lingerie in Bronx with cocaine and no shoes. I hated it for what it said, for what it represented, for what it really meant. My left wrist itched. I rubbed it, desperate for the feeling, my feelings to go away. You okay? The voice was male, melodic, and a stark reminder I only felt alone. I was not, surrounded by police and gawkers and at least one TV reporter, all standing on opposite sides of the crime tape like it was an 8th grade dance. Was I okay? Not in the slightest. I hadn't seen my little sister in 2 years. Now I never would. I wanted to ignore the question, just like I ignored the trickle of sweat rolling down my cheek. It felt better than tears. I'm fine, I finally said automatically, not even giving the man a glance. Former reality star Desiree Pierce found dead in lingerie in Bronx with cocaine and no shoes. Desiree would have hated the headline too, the use of the word former as much as the use of the word dead. And the mention of what she wore, but not who, would have annoyed her more than calling out the cocaine. The last time we'd actually spoken, she claimed she'd stopped using. I hadn't believed her. This was probably the first time I wasn't happy to be proven right. You sure you're okay? The same voice again. I finally looked up from my phone to see who was talking. He was black, tall, smiling like he knew the effect his face had on women. Not me, at least not today, or for the last couple of years, if I was being honest. I nodded. Unfortunately, he took it as a sign to continue. You know her? Only well enough to have predicted this scenario, both in nightmares. You're going to overdose one day, and in daydreams. You're going to overdose one day. I'll be there when you wake up to say I told you so. I played it out dozens of times in dozens of ways for years before I'd cut her off. And yet, despite telling her that this was going to happen, I still wasn't the least bit prepared. Did I know her? I finally spoke. Not as well as I should have.
Wow. All right. Well, here's a question for you, a couple
Okay.
questions. You and I corresponded briefly about diversity in crime writing, and then we've got one of your heroes here, Valerie, as well. So I just would love to hear your thoughts on where we're at with diversity in crime writing and where
So
we're going.
when I won my Anthony Award in 2018, Sisters in Crime has a list of all of the people who are published that are marginalized. So that includes queer people, that includes, Black people, that includes Latinx people, that includes people of Asian descent, includes people who are Indigenous. And at that time, it was like maybe a little like under 300, like total, which is ridiculous when you consider how many books are published each year for 300 total, And so since then, it's gotten better. You have people like S.A. Cosby, people like Tracy Clark, who are doing great. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of racism, in the industry. There's still a lot of bigots in the industry. People who kind of just casually say things and think that we don't notice that they're being racist. So we have a long way to go, but I'm excited about it. And I just think it needs to just become status quo and not just a trend. So.
Thank you. And let me ask you this too. You're writing about a glamorous reality TV star, and you have written for TV,
Yes.
right? And you attended USC, is that correct? So
Yes,
you've
I
lived
did,
on
which is
the other
the top film school in the country. Sorry.
right? Okay, and so you've lived on the other coast too, and you've
Yes.
seen the Hollywood life and all that stuff.
Yes.
So now that you've, what was that helpful in writing for this reality TV character?
Yeah, I've always worked in entertainment in some form. My first jobs were a features reporter for the Daily News. I worked as a hip hop magazine. I worked in television. Even now, my day job, I work for a media company. So I kind of get to see a backstage glimpse of fame, and I'm fascinated with people's fascination of fame, and I just love reality television, so I'm kind of fascinated with that. And I'm also kind of fascinated with Instagram and this whole idea of this social media, where you I say your life is filtered in more than just the photos, right? You just kind of present this picture perfect life, which is not accurate, and just makes other people feel bad and present their own picture perfect, non-accurate life. So.
Well, thank you so much for that. I was wondering what that was like for you writing this character. All right, well, we've got to keep moving. John.
Yes.
John,
Hello.
tell me what this is called again.
It's called a boulevardière.
Boulevardier.
Yeah.
Well, explain
real
what's
good.
I think I'm missing one ingredient, but I have 2 out of the 3, including the Hendrix gin and Campari.
Yes, it's Campari, gin, and red vermouth, sweet vermouth.
Oh.
And it's
All right.
actually, the Boulevardière is not gin, it's bourbon.
Okay. I had the Hendrix in there for some reason.
Well, that's because Hendrix it's exactly the same drink as a Boulevardière, except it's called a Negroni, and that is the one that has gin on it. Gin, Campari, and red vermouth.
Okay. Well, then I might have this slightly wrong, but I will still.
It's delicious.
I will still.
You got to try it.
Can I MC next month too? This is great.
Sure.
Okay. And then also, I know that you love brie. Okay. I don't know why my brie is hacked up into a weird little piece, but I have a little piece of brie here. I do not have the other things. I know there's a specific cracker that you love, but
The Rain Coast Crisp.
And what's it called?
The Rain Coast Crisp.
Rain Coast Crisps.
Yes, we're very lucky in California. We have some really nice, culinary moments. And
that's right.
Yeah, you go to any good deli and they're going to have all of this stuff. So
they're going to have that good stuff. All right. I have Trader Joe's.
Yeah, Trader Joe's is great.
All right. Well, John, would you read to us?
Sure. I'll read the first page and a half of the missing piece.
Okay. Thank you.
It'll catch you right up to where we are here.
Okay.
The customer cut a fine figure, an attorney in a $1,000 business suit. Like the werewolves of London, his hair was perfect, full and speckled with just the right amount of gray for the ever crucial gravitas. Apparently, deep in thought, he was twirling his empty wine glass around on the circle of condensation that had formed in front of him at the bar. His bartender, the eponymous owner of Lou the Greek's restaurant, a popular watering hole of the legal community just across the street from San Francisco's Hall of Justice, took the twirling as a clue and moseyed on down to his only customer. Another one, Wes? Wes Farrell considered for a short moment before he shook his head. Better not, Lou. I've got to drive home in a while. 2 glasses of wine at lunch is too much. For what? Well, driving comes to mind. So get an Uber and pay for parking overnight in the lot out there, $40 per any portion of the day, plus the Uber home and back. We're talking 100 bills here. That's an expensive glass of this fine wine. Lou shrugged. Okay, so maybe not an Uber, but even if you drove, so what? What do you mean, so what? I mean, you're Wes Farrell. You get pulled over, you tell them who you are, though they'd probably already know that anyway. They tell you to have a nice day and send you on your way. This brought a dry chuckle. Nice fantasy, Lou, but I don't think so. More likely as one of the city's finest pulls me over and says, hey, didn't you used to be Wes Farrell, the district attorney? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, you're not anymore. And he writes me up anyway. I get tagged for a DUI and then I'm well and truly screwed. That'll never happen. It might if I have another glass of wine. That's a hell of a lot of burden to put on a 6-ounce pour. I know it is, it's a bitch, but there you go. Farrell gave his glass another quarter turn, threw a glance up at the ceiling, came back to his bartender. Ah, what the hell, Lou, he said. Hit me again, would you?
Love it. Thank you so
Here's
much.
our XTA deciding whether or not he's going to become a district attorney anymore or he's going to become a defense attorney.
Mhm.
And it drives the book.
Mhm. So, John, you are a rock star.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say rock star.
Tell us about your CD past, please.
Oh, I used to front a band in the Bay Area called Johnny Capo and his Real Good Band. And it was just my day job, even though it was at night. But I was trying to write as well as write music as write books. And I got lucky. I found a bunch of good players to sit with me. And we played, every night for most of 2 years. And then you make CDs because that's what you do. I write a lot of music and they're on my CDs.
Mm-hmm. And
But I'm not famous as a songwriter, which is a shame.
Still play music? Do you still perform?
I don't really perform anymore. You can tell my voice is a little crackly. And about 3 years ago, I had a coughing fit that lasted 6 weeks, and it scarred my vocal cords.
Mm.
So I'm afraid if you want to listen to the real John Lescroart, you got to go and buy the CD.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the CD is called?
Well, there's called As the Crow Flies is one of them. Another one is Whiskey and Roses. Another one is Demos and something. Demos.
Something.
I don't know. Yeah.
So, and then one more question, John.
Sure.
So you have, so you were one of the founders of International Thriller Writers. This is right?
Well,
Right.
in a sense, I was sitting at my desk like I am now, and Gail Linz gave me a call, and she told me about the idea of the International Thriller Writers and asked me if I could put up a little bit of money. And I said, why don't I put up a lot of money and we'll see what we can do. So I gave him $5,000, which I thought was a lot of money.
Mhm.
And it set the stage for Clive Cussler, then came in and a few other people like that. And, next thing you know, we had ITW, which is really a great organization. I love it.
I do too. And so you have a reputation for investing in new and upcoming writers. And I was just wondering if there was an author or a specific teacher at the start of your journey who made that investment in you.
Well, I was really fortunate. I wrote a book called Sunburn, and I had no idea what to do with it. I sent it off to my old high school English teacher, and I said, what do you think? And he said, this is a terrible book. Don't do anything with it. So the next day, I got a call from his wife, and he had left the manuscript on the end table of his bed. And his wife called me up and she said, I love this book. It's beautiful. And I said, that's so great. Thank you. What do you think I should do with it? And she said, well, you should enter it in a literary award, program. So I said, well, I don't even know how to do that. She says, well, I'll do it for you. This is such a great book. So she did it. 4 months went by. One day then I'm sitting at my day job, my daytime job, really. And I got a call from the San Francisco Foundation saying I'd won the Joseph Henry Jackson Award. and it was $2,000 back in 1978, which was a fortune. And it just gave me confidence that maybe I could make a living doing this.
Wow.
It's great.
I love that story. And I love the story of having someone advocating for you. Well, there are so many questions that I wanted to still ask. I wanted to ask Rhys about her, it's Celtic harp, right? Celtic harp playing. I wanted to ask Valerie more questions. Kellye, I had more questions for you. John, I had more questions for you, but I think we need to allow a few from the readers. So Chris, could you share with us a few of the questions?
Well, we do have a couple of questions. We have a question from one of our Facebook viewers who wants to know how long everyone has been writing. So
can we round robin that real fast?
If you can keep your answers brief, then we can get more questions in.
Perfect.
So I'm going to put you all up.
Okay, I'm going to go in order then. Rhys, I'll just ask you real quick, and then we'll do Valerie and Kellye and John.
Okay, I've been writing since I was 4, my mother says. So there's never been a time I haven't, other people get locked away, but I live in a pretend world all the time and I love it.
Valerie. I think you're muted. Sorry.
Writers, I think, are often born and unmade. I too, as a child, had children's plays, but I was first published in 1995 with When Death Comes Stealing, which was my first book. Actually, I'd written a young adult novel before that. But I think I do agree that it's something that stays with you. And if you have a child who loves to read and write, then do treat them well, because you don't want them writing about you in 40 years. So I think it's absolutely, it's something that always is part of you as a writer, if you're one.
Kellye.
Similar. I was 5 when I wanted to be an author, but I was too scared. So I didn't really start a book to 2011. That was my first book, Hollywood Homicide, which didn't get published till 2017.
And how old were you in 2011?
Oh my God, you want me to out my age.
I'm sorry.
I am currently, I'm not ashamed. I look good. I'm currently 43 years old. So what is that? I guess I was early 30s.
I can't do math. So I was just curious. Yeah.
32, I guess.
Younger than my daughters.
Yes.
My grown daughters.
John, when did you start?
I wrote my first couple of novels in college. I didn't get them published until much later, but both of them wound up being published eventually.
Wow.
One of them was the Sherlock Holmes story I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm.
And the other was Sunburn, the other anecdote I just told.
Mm-hmm.
So I started then and I have kept up ever since. I guess it's been about 50 years.
Wow. Wow.
Wow. And then Mary Lou Shea had 2 questions. She wanted to know first how you feel about Thriller Fest, if you feel a novice writer would benefit from attending Thriller Fest. And second, she wants to know, how do you know when the research you've done is enough when you're writing a crime fiction novel? Rhys sort of touched on it, so she wondered if Rhys could answer first, but I remember Francine Matthews telling me when she started getting the repeat answers doing research, she knew she had researched everything.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with research is that you can go down the rabbit hole. You look for one thing and you find something else that's really interesting. And then I reckon I use 10% of the research that I do, but the fact that I know the other 90% makes the book stronger. So what I do is normally, because I write historicals these days, I do the big research ahead of time, like I would read the political situation or whatever, that sort of thing ahead of time. But then when you're writing, there's something on every page, in the early Molly books, Molly goes out and she's tailing someone. I thought, wait, what does she write with? You can't carry a pen and an inkwell with you. What did they have in those days? So, all these little things you have to look up as you go along. But the one mistake, if you're a new writer, the one mistake is to say, I have done all this research and now you're bloody well going to get it whether you like it or not. So you don't, the fact that you know it makes it a strong book, but you don't have to thrust it down your readers' throats.
That was a brilliant analysis.
I'll answer I think in terms of Thriller Fest, I'm not gonna lie, it's expensive. So if you can afford to come to New York City in the summer, you have the time and you can come in, I would definitely suggest it. There are other things like Crime Bake, which I think is a put on by the New England chapters of Mystery Rise of America and Sisters in Crime. I think there's Killer Nashville. There's some other conferences that for readers. There's like Midwest. There's lots of other conferences for writers as well. Also, I would say join like things like Sisters in Crime. They have a Guppies chapter, which is great for novice writers. So there are lots of different options besides Thriller Fest, but definitely go to Thriller Fest if you can afford it.
In terms of research, it is a rabbit hole. You can go and go and go, and then you end up, it gets in the way. At some point, you simply have to write. It's easy sometimes to procrastinate and say, "Oh, I want to research this. What is this? What is this point?" On and on and on and on. But then at some point, you have to have enough. And then if you need to chip in something else, you go back and do it again. But you never want to you never want to lose the rhythm of the book. For me, anyway. And this is what the characters, and that's what's important to a reader. But certainly I agree that research it's fun, frankly. I enjoy it. But at some point you do need to really get into the piece.
Right. You should never really know that there's research there. It should be invisible. It should be just integral to the story.
Yeah, that's true.
So I have a question for Valerie. You were talking about glimmers. And it fascinated me. And I'm wondering if you ever have glimmers. I mean, is this something that comes from you? Is this something?
I have, I guess you would call it artistic license. No, I'm afraid. I know people who are very sensitive to things, and nutmeg is fine with me. I mean, I don't see glimmers. I don't hear things. But I did a reading with a club yesterday, and there was one lady there who really does have these particular gifts, and I was like in awe. She could actually predict the future. But no, I'm afraid that it's all made up. But I do absolutely respect people's sense of that, people who are gifted as that. And I have known people who say they're gifted, but when it comes down to it, it is there are so many things in life that you can't understand that have more than just logical and that you can see, hear, and smell. So give life its gifts. And that, I think, is just a respect, and that those who have, no, I don't see any glimmers. Not yet, anyway. Who knows what'll happen in 10 years.
So someone has told me that I'm psychic, and what happens is I just think of something, and like then I'll like contact the person, like, "Oh, how was this?" And they'll like, "Oh, I'm there now." So honestly, I think that sometimes probably a lot more people than you think are psychic. You just have something that comes in your head, and it might be is because of that versus like not visions and like not things like that.
That's very true, Kellye. A lot of people I know, one of my daughters so I can understand that. Yeah. And you do when in writing about it, and you do research as to what this is for certain people. Yeah. But it's certainly something that is fascinating to me, which is why I guess I wrote the paranormal novels when I did.
Right. So what's next up for everyone? Can I ask that?
Well, I'll go first since I was the bee in this. I'm in the middle of writing the next big standalone, which again takes place in multiple places and times. And I'm currently in the middle of World War II, and I'm in France, in an undercover operation in France. And I know things are going to get so bad, but I keep writing slower and slower because I don't want the bad things to happen, but they've got to. So, when you write something and you're going to make horrible things happen to a character, you become so invested in that character that it's really awful. So I know I've got to do it, and I've got to bite the bullet, but I'm sort of sitting there each day doing a little bit more description, like, no, get on with it, So it's going to be, it's called Island of Lost Boys, and it takes place in Paris, takes place in World War II, it takes place in Australia after the war.
Valerie, what's next for you?
I'm writing another Odessa Jones, my third one, called A Shimmer of Red. And it's interesting. I'm getting into it now. And that's what I'm working on now.
Kellye?
So a couple of years ago, I was at a friend's house in Baltimore, and she wasn't there, but I was there for a writer's retreat. And it was this beautiful 4-story row house. I remember thinking, I can come downstairs tomorrow and there could be a dead body in the foyer and I would have no clue how it got there. And her neighbors would be like, who's this Black girl? Why'd she kill somebody? So that's the idea for my next book. This woman goes to Jersey City with her boyfriend for a romantic getaway, comes downstairs one day, her boyfriend's gone, and there's this missing white woman in her foyer.
John, what's next for you?
Well, I just signed a contract for my next Business Hardy book, so I think I'm going to write it.
Do we know how many there will be in the series total?
Well, this book, The Missing Piece, is book number 30. I don't know how many they count as the Business Hardy books, because there were different characters that took over in several portions of the whole series. Where all of a sudden, Abe Glitsky was the main person, or Wyatt Hunt was the main person, or Gina Roque was the main person. And that has always been what I've kind of trusted in my heart. And when those people show up and say, write about me, I do that.
We have one more question, if we have time, from Marie Elaine on Facebook. Is an avid reader. Oh no, I'm sorry. She's an avid reader and has read over 80 books this year. She's going to read all of our books, all of these books. Deb Carlin is wondering if you all write synopsis prior to sitting down and getting into it, or do you just let the characters go off on their own?
Well, I'm not, you're either an outliner or a pantser. And I start usually knowing the historical background of where I'm going to be, where I'm going to put my characters. And then they just sort of, you can't control them. They just run off and do things and you have to run behind and make notes. That's how I work.
Valerie?
Kind of a combination. I have a general sense where it's going. But then when you begin to write characters, and particularly for me, after I begin writing dialogue, they kind of take on a life of their own.
Yeah.
But it's like like driving in a storm, you can see, or in a snow, you can see just so far ahead with the headlights, and then you go from there. So it's kind of a sense, but not completely outlined. But you have to leave yourself a lot of room for characters to grow, for me anyway, and to take on, become their own selves. And that's the process for me.
Kellye?
It's funny, Allison Galen just said the same thing, Valerie. So when I started out, I was like a super plotter because the blank page scares me. I hate writing, but I love rewriting. But with this latest book, I am kind of doing the same thing where I have this outline, and as I'm writing it, I'm kind of just outlining a few scenes ahead, and it's been interesting to see the process. It's been slower, but it's been interesting.
Makes you secure. It makes you feel secure when you get up in the morning and oh, this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, otherwise I cry.
I let you.
John?
I agree with what Rhys did. She used the word pantser, which means you're writing for the seat of your pants. And my first books, I outlined carefully. A couple of them ran to 200-page outlines, and then that was a whole different thing eventually, where I just said, I don't need to write 2 books every time I hand in one. So now I'm just really a seat of the pantser guy. I come in, say, what are you guys going to do today? Here we go. Let's go. Have some fun.
I love it. I love it. Well, do we have any more questions?
That's all we have at this point.
Oh, well, we have a little visitor who returned to, oh, no, okay. Never mind. Well, I just want to say thank you so much. I think we're toward the end of our time. Are we at the end, Chris? Or do we?
We are actually over our time.
Oh, shoot. I still had questions for people. Kellye, I wanted to ask you about your grandmother, and Valerie had questions for you, and Rhys, I wanted to ask you, and John. That's the sign of a good session when you still have things to talk about on the table. Yeah. So I want to thank you all for your time. I want to thank you for your input. Thank you for sharing with us your books, your art, your life, and your favorite snacks. And I want to tell our listeners that I hope you'll join us next month in April when we will be talking with J.D. Barker, Grace D. Lee, Erica Ferencik, I believe is how you pronounce it. You know me, I'm having pronunciation.
I just met her. It's forensic. Isn't that correct?
Forensic.
Yeah,
Forensic.
forensic.
Oh, that's cool.
I read
And
it.
also our very own Alex Kava, who is a fellow Nebraskan just down the road from me. So I'm really excited about that. If you talk about tonight, please do include hashtags for Rogue Women Writers. Please do go pick up these books because they are fabulous, and check out the books that came before these as well. So thank you again to our guests. It was a pleasure to have you. It was a pleasure to learn a little bit more about you, and I hope I get to meet you in person soon. So,
You're a lovely host. Thank you for hosting.
oh, it's my first time. Oh, thank you. But I got to do
Great job.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Here.
You.
Bye.